It was July 12, 2012. Ashton Rule was 17 and about to start his senior year at Centennial High School. He had some friends over for a movie night, and by the morning, his family would never be the same. I'm Ethan Jensen with the Win TV Special Report, and this is Flatlined.
Ashton was, by far the coolest person I've ever met in my life. He's also the smartest person I've ever known. I used to joke that he could convince anyone to do anything. He once talked one of his friends into lighting both of his arms on fire, just because he was like, oh, like you'll shave your arms with the fire and it'll work out great, I promise. He was one of the coolest people I've ever met. He's super funny, super intelligent, and an idiot.
Ashton was a straight A student in a gifted and talented program. He had longer hair, I guess you'll see in some of the pictures. We always told him he could do whatever he wanted with his hair. He was very much into his appearance, but he could do whatever he wanted with his hair as long as he had the grades to keep, to make it okay, I guess. And he was very extreme sports, loved to skateboard, liked to jump off of everything, very outdoorsy, loved animals and people, and just busy guy, always up to something. I call him the X Games kid, just thought he was going to be the next snowboarder or skateboarder, and he just loved life.
The night it all happened, he had like a friend or two over and his girlfriend. He was kind of just off in his room for the majority of the night. Went downstairs at some point. Him and my mom were chit-chatting.
And we just had a good talk, and he was like, I'm going to make some changes in my life, Mom, things are going to be better, everyone's going to get along, and I'll stay out of trouble. And it's like, okay, I'll go ahead and go upstairs. I'm going to go to bed. So I went to bed and went to work the next morning.
Woke up to knocking on my door. Opened the door. There was a police officer standing there. He was like, hey, what's your name? I was like, Mitchell. Do you know if there was a party here last night? There's no party here last night. He's like, are you sure? I was like, yeah. He's like, well, it's noon right now and you're just waking up. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you, dude. I was up all night playing video games. And he was like, all right, well, I'm going to be blunt with you. Your brother's dead. I need you to go downstairs.
He and his friends were doing cheese heroin. And so that night he overdosed. Then
it was just kind of a blur of really not knowing quite what happened until days later. Obviously it was all over social media. Like someone went out and immediately told the story, but I had my phone and my computer confiscated by the police during their search for some reason, so I had no access to any of that.
Since they were both doing it, his friend couldn't help him either, so they were both basically passed out. And I guess the results from the coroner was that he asphyxiated on his vomit. So as you die, your body starts to shut down and the fluids all come up. And since he couldn't move or do anything in his state, he suffocated.
So it was just waiting to hear what even happened. It's not great. Yeah, there's not much else to really say about it. Drugs definitely tore it to hell and back. We had to basically start over. Drugs is still probably a sensitive topic in general around our family. I had to go to therapy for a while, even recently. It's the effects of especially just losing a family member, you'll never quite get past that. It's it's definitely something that's hard to deal with. I almost said a bad word. But yeah, no, it's crappy. I mean, you had to reset the whole family dynamic, quite frankly. I mean, we lost the oldest son. It's, especially being like the middle child, like I always had someone to look ahead to, like, okay, so he did that, and that was really stupid. I'm not going to do that. And now I've kind of got to pave the way for my sister in some extent. And, I mean, drugs definitely changed probably my whole life, quite frankly.
There's just so many things. Every holiday, every birthday that comes and goes, every anniversary of his death that comes and goes. You know, and you're just everything has changed. Everything. It'll never be the life that it once was.
Since 1985, the number of drug juvenile court cases has increased by 41%. Chief Bruce of the Frisco Police Department and Lindsay Wayne, Collin County Juvenile Prosecutor, talked about the legal impacts of taking and distributing illegal substances.
Well, the same punishment for students are the same as adults. If it's like marijuana, it's a Class B misdemeanor, and so that could be punishable up to 6 months in the county jail, except it would be through the juvenile detention centers.
Depending on the circumstances around that crime, you know, what your intent was or what your frame of mind was. There's a special provision that if you deliver drugs and then they die or their serious bodily injury results, there's a second-degree felony that can result from that. If you are also supplying drugs and somebody dies or overdoses in your presence, I mean, there's the strong possibility, depending on your role in supplying the drugs and how you participated in that event and what you did or didn't do when the person began to OD, and then led to death, you could be charged with criminally negligent homicide, manslaughter, and then if your intent was to truly hurt somebody or kill them with the amount of drugs that you supplied and helped inject or whatever it may be, then there is always the possibility of murder as well. Likewise, I've seen where, you know, obviously being a felon affects you in so many ways. It'll affect your ability to get a job. It'll affect, it depends on the type of crime. It can affect your driver's license status. It could affect how much you have to pay to get your driver's license back, you know, if it's like a felony drug court or some of the felony drug offenses. It can affect where you live and your ability to live in apartments or rent a house. There's so many consequences to becoming a felon. It can really impact your ability for college, graduate school, military, I mean, you name it. But on top of that, there's a lot of provisions for juveniles to try to help them with their criminal records, I guess you could say, for their futures. We don't necessarily want to ruin someone's life based on a decision they made as a teenager, as a juvenile.
What happens is the officer's going to generally take that juvenile into custody for, say, marijuana, and they're going to process them and transfer them over to the juvenile detention facility in Collin County. Could happen in Denton County also, because we're in 2 counties. It depends on where the offense occurred. But what happens there is they'll get processed in, we'll follow up, we'll file the case, and generally the juvenile detention centers will try to work with the parents. If it's a first offense, they usually try to go with some sort of supervised court approval for them to not stay in trouble. Almost like defensive driving, but to take a few classes, to be on probation for a short period of time. If you can show that you cannot continually get in trouble, then often they will just remove that first one.
As a juvenile. And so there's a lot of things out there that are done to protect the juvenile, to protect their identity. Everything's confidential. There's just a lot of ways that we go about trying to make sure we don't ruin a juvenile's life. based on some of these types of offenses. In fact, everything we do is we want to try to make it better and keep them from becoming an adult offender.
As drugs evolve and become more advanced, so does the fighting force. Local canine units have played a big role in making the job a lot more easier and exact. Nicholas Stembla explores the effectiveness of these drug detection dogs.
Canines are highly trained contributors to drug searches on school campuses. Officer Sample and his partner Laney are specialists in the detection of illegal substances in the fight against the distribution and abuse of drugs.
So our dogs are trained to find marijuana, cocaine, methamphetamines, and heroin, and derivatives of each of those. So the dogs will alert to the THC oils, the pot brownies, all that stuff. You know, derivatives of cocaine would be Laney, crack. You have with meth, MDMA is really close in molecules and stuff, so the dogs automatically alert to MDMA too. If any of you have dogs at home, you see how quick the dog can go to the park and find other dog urine and stuff like that. So I kind of reprogrammed his mind, and anytime he comes out of the car and is walking down a hallway or anything like that, he's constantly smelling for drugs, just like a normal dog would be smelling for dog urine or trying to find a cat or something like that.
Canine units are very successful in drug detection. In an abstract posted by the U.S. National Library of Medicine in 2014, they found that fully trained police dogs were able to detect drugs 87.7% of the time in a little over a minute.
I mean, they're so good they can pick up on residual odor. So if you've been handling some type of drugs or something like that, and you touch the door handle, or the dogs can pick up on just that small amount.
I'm Nicholas Stembla for Win TV.
Opioid overdoses are becoming a big problem in the United States and schools all around it. Although it might not be prevalent here at Wakeland, there is still a need to know the dangers of prescription and illegal drugs.
In the developing brain, the thing that we know is that your chances of becoming addicted to either that substance or something similar to that are increased greatly. The brain does not stop developing until around the age of 25. One of the things that we are learning from drugs, especially in teens, adolescents, and young adults, is that those drugs affect the way that your brain functions and develops and the interconnections in the brain. So long-term effects are what we call systemic or across the body. And so you'll have some mental effects that are long-lasting, and then also some physical changes that occur depending on what type of substance. Different drugs are going to be handled or processed through the body differently. And so when you talk about, for example, methamphetamine as being a stimulant, you're going to have hallucinations, you're going to have your heart rate increase, you're going to have your blood pressure increase. Whereas some of the depressants, such as heroin and opiates and painkillers, those will have a tendency to do the opposite. Street drugs traditionally are not manufactured in a sterile environment or in a place where they can control how much drug gets into each one of those tablets. And so obviously we see in the emergency department a lot of people who come in with overdoses from different substances that are not necessarily pure. If you're not necessarily in an emergent situation, but you're concerned about what you've taken, there's the North Texas Poison Control Center that is staffed by nurses and physicians 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you can reach out to them and they can give you advice of whether you need to come into the emergency department or if there's immediate actions that you need to take. In an emergency, we want you to utilize the emergency services that are available to you by calling 911. That'll activate the paramedics to come out. They have different medications in the ambulance that they can use immediately to help the person who may not be breathing or may have other types of symptoms.
You can find help at AboveTheInfluence.com, the Collin County Substance Abuse Coalition, and by reaching out to a trusted adult here at Wakeland. Drug abuse is not to be something taken lightly. The legal and physical ramifications are just not worth it. If you or someone you know is suffering from any substance abuse, know you are not alone. I'm Ethan Jensen for Win TV.